Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being here this morning with us to talk about social media and whether or not they are shaping how we vote. I'm delighted to have 5 panelists with me today around the table. Next to me, Nesrine SLAOUI. Nesrine, you are a journalist, editorialist. We've got ZARADER also. He's CEO of Bona. Jacques Attali is with us also, and we have Lionel RAGOT, who is going to help me moderate this session. He's a member of the Cercle des économistes, and you also are a university professor in Paris. And later on, we'll be joined by someone who's on the train right now, Sibyle, CEO of Radio France. So she's due to be with us later on if the trains are with us. So first of all, I'm going to hand the floor to you, Lionel, from the Cercle des économistes. You can give us the economic slant, and then we'll get the discussion underway. Thank you very much, Charlie. Yeah, a few introductory words here. I'm going to start by talking about the title of this conference here, facing up to clash of realities. Well, if we're facing a clash of realities, it's because they do not correspond to the feeling that we have about the world in which we live, which doesn't always correspond to our opinions. And in truth, many of us are deciding not to face up to these realities by enclosing ourselves in the comfort of these echo chambers, the social media, where we join forces with people similar to us, who have the same points of interest and the same political opinions as us. It's very rare on these social networks that we come face to face with people who do not share the same point of view as us. So this phenomenon leads to a political polarization, which is what our 4 panelists are going to be talking about. But do social networks influence democracy and how people vote? Well, we could say it's more a problem for sociologists than for economists. But during these few minutes, I'd like to say that economists also try to work on this theme, and I'm going to give you a couple of examples. One which is very theoretical, the other more empirical, of work carried out by economists on this particular question. First example. This is work which was published at the beginning of the year by Aaron Acemoglu, who is a Nobel Economic Prize 2024, who's written a book which very few people will be reading apart from specialist economists. And the result isn't absolutely easy to understand, but he's showing that the fact that we have polarization and the social networks deciding to make sure that only the same profiles go on that particular network is not necessarily a strategy on their part. It's simply a response to economic motivations, because a social media is a business. It has to maximize profit. One might expect, therefore, that the best network for them will be the network with the most people, but in fact that's not the case. And the writers say that there's a polarization starts when social media start to become unreliable, when they feature fake news. And then at that moment, they are going to lock themselves up, and that naturally creates this polarization. So it's not the strategy of the social media in question. No, it's the result of economic motivations. And so these social networks are in silos. Another example is not theoretical at all, it's an empirical one. This is work carried out at the beginning of the year by Jacques, who is a member of the Circle of Economists here in Aix. And with the co-authors, they took to look at, when I've talked about citizens or other, why did they choose polarization and the platforms, they decided to look at the political sphere. And they took a look at how the discourses of MPs are evolving since the 90s, and what they have highlighted is that since 2017 there has been quite a radical change in the speeches that MPs make at French Parliament, and what they're saying now, the discourse now, can be found on TikTok now. So these are short formats, very incisive, and they generate a bit of a buzz. And it has an impact on citizens, but it also has an impact on the political classes, which are adapting their behaviours not only on social media, but even in the Houses of Parliament here in France. And those kind of speeches are designed for followers on social media, such as TikTok. So those are a couple of starting points for our conversation. Thank you very much, Lionel. Sibyle has arrived and she's with us now. Thank you very much to her. So the first question, I'm going to put it to Jacques Attali. Do social media impact democracy? The floor is yours. The answer is yes, as all media do. We addressed this question when printed newspapers were brought about in the 17th century, and there were all kinds of rumors and narratives emerging, and we addressed the same question when radio was invented and then when TV was invented, and it's a similar situation with social media. The social media are much more powerful. Social media mean that we can have access from all over the world. We don't have to just make do with what's going on in our own village. We can talk with the rest of the world if we want to. And we can learn so much about the world. But I often use this metaphor. The social networks are a tool, a bit like a hammer. A hammer can be used to build things, and it can also be used to destroy things. And today, it's absolutely clear that social media, such as the press, but with much greater resources, is working against democracy. Because they're really looking to create a sensation every time. They're looking to appeal to passions and emotions, and also they don't delve deeply into issues, and they know that fake news will have much greater impact on the brain than true news. And the same way as bad news will make people be a bit more attentive. So people think that bad news is more important than good news. And so we are pre-programmed to attach greater attention to bad news, even if it is fake bad news, because it fuels our survival instincts. And this new way of expressing, which is much broader, focuses on bad news, even if it's fake bad news, and makes it's difficult to distinguish what's true news and what's false news, because the field of false news is much more vast than the field of good news. And so as human beings, we're going towards a generalization of bad news, and because it creates more emotion and it triggers an emotional response. So quite naturally, that drives polarization and extremes. This was true with newspapers, which evolved in the same way. It is not true, strangely enough, with the TV, apart from in the States. And it was not the case in many countries with radio, although that's not the case for every country. The radio remains the only medium, in my opinion, that is a cool-headed medium where you can address subjects in depth, because it is a medium that you don't interact with directly, or not very often anyway. and it gives you an opportunity to develop your argument in a more serious manner. And one must not just focus on France, you must look at other countries in Europe. And we note that there's a lot of passion for extremes and driving your audience through fake news and bad news, etc. It's quite general. Social networks, do they generate the results of elections? We've seen that Facebook played a big role in Brexit. We saw that in Romania, Bulgaria, in their elections, American elections also. And the first American election influenced by the media was Obama's election. And then, quite naturally, we are working towards polarization of how people express themselves. The French MPs was a very good example there. And the only response to this is to develop a critical mindset, to explain more clearly the mechanisms of mental stimulation that are used by social networks. And there's only one country, in my opinion, which is doing the right thing, and that's Finland. Finland today is the country with the best education system. What Finland is doing to explain to children of 5 years old what social networks are, why they manipulate us, what you can do to prevent manipulation. Not saying that social networks are absolutely devilish, no, but saying that there are good things in there, but you have to know how to manage them. So teaching about social networks, teaching about how to enjoy reading on social networks and elsewhere. And I think that is the answer. I think the example of Finland is kind of unique, and let's keep an eye on it. Nesrine. Yes, let's give him a round of applause there. Nesrine, I saw you nodding your head quite a bit as you were listening to Jacques Attali. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, indeed. There are many interesting things. In France, for example, we haven't been educating people about social networks. Let me just say who I am. I'm a journalist, and I'm on Instagram and TikTok. I've got 500,000 followers, and I generate up to 5 million views for my posts. And so I feel a huge responsibility when I'm putting content out there. And I was very active during the dissolution of the French government. When I was studying political sciences, I was with some 25-year-olds who didn't understand what a dissolution was. And so I could use social networks to explain that people need content which make things easier to understand. But it's very difficult to do it on platforms that need constant stimulation. The image I always use to try and explain that these are not neutral spaces is that you have to share, if you share your video of a dead body or a cat, you're addressing the same audience. So either you want to shock or you want to move people. Facebook, Telegram, TikTok and all the rest are designed to include advertising to push you to buy things. So in 2024, there was a study which said that social networks create some kind of enclosure, depending on your political convictions, your age, where you live. The platform will suggest content for you, which will reinforce your own vision of the world, your own perception of things. And that's very problematic in a democracy, because in a democracy, you need to be able to compare different opinions and base your discourse on fact. And it's rather disturbing when it makes the extreme right flourish. In one newspaper, I wrote about Jourdain Bardella, saying how he was a very good communicator on TikTok because he could really adopt those codes of the youngsters using rap, etc., to eat sweets behind the scenes of an interview, etc., and to reinvent political communication for the social media. And we see the MPs in France, even the left-wing MPs in France, staging themselves when they're speaking out publicly, and then also put these viral videos of 15 seconds with one simple sentence, and that will influence the whole political sphere. So it's become the politics of punchline on the TV and on social media as well. You're looking all the time for that tagline. And from a journalistic point of view, it's very difficult of the media to follow the pace of all of this news and to counter these waves of fake news which have been funded for specific targets. During Trump's election, that was the case. Funding fake news about conspiracy theories to support Trump. In Europe, we haven't got any surveys which show this, but there is a part of the population which is very sensitive. It's dependent on your education, on where you live, whether you're living in the outskirts or in the south of France. These are areas where people are much more sensitive to fake news and to unverified news. And there is a two-pronged dynamic here. In French society, yes, people are losing confidence in their politicians, and they're losing confidence in journalists as well. So there's a transfer of trust into influencers. So this means that when you're talking about French people between 18 and 35 years, because politicians and the media aren't responding to social needs, then the influencers are called upon. They are not necessarily informed on the subject, but they are asked to take a stand on a subject about the situation of the country. And we see that this dynamic is rather complex, and I will finish with this. And it says, speaks volumes about the needs of young journalists who manage these platforms, because they are spaces for creativity, yes, but also they're spaces for responsibility. Sibyle, how do you react to all of this at the head of Radio France? First of all, I'd like to apologize for my late arrival. It was due to the train. I think the media must resist and adapt. There's this relationship of attraction and repulsion with social media. Elon Musk, when he purchased X, he said X will replace the media and will create true freedom of expression. As you no doubt have remarked, the Americans are champions of selling liberty and freedom to us when they want to sell us their products. So these platforms are new Agora, lots of youngsters there. 18% of youngsters in France say they take their news exclusively from social media around the world. The figures that have been recently published were 38% of the under 35s who take their news from social media. So it really is a true trend. So the media 10 years ago decided to be present in social media, and the risk is there when you're working in a universe which Jacques Attali described. Thank you for what he said about the radio. In this world, there is no hierarchy. There is no choice between what is true, what is untrue. The algorithm decides everything. The algorithm makes some things visible, others invisible. And behind that, we've got the economy, the economics of attention. So we want commitment. We want to engage audience, and the most engaging subjects are those that trigger anger, for example, and extreme violence. It's quite contagious. The French government have been talking about this recently, and it's been talked about in other arenas. Certain media have accelerated, and it has generalized news based on emotion. People from social media who have been invited onto the TV studios, for example. This trend, well, I think what we should do at the radio is we need to be responsible, democratic. We need to withstand this and resist it. We have to make sure that what we are broadcasting is reliable. And that is why we, Radio France, are on X, so that we can broadcast news which is verified and can be verified. And then there's an acceleration with media who take the time. Democracy was defined thanks to the laws. And there's a maturation process of opinion. Laws which define a society are slow and they incorporate all aspects of a debate. We have to combat that speeding up, the acceleration. We need to have long, slow formats carried by the media. And the final challenge is to federate. Otherwise, we're heading towards polarization, where we'll find content which is scattered hither and thither, which causes fragmentation among public opinion. And so it really is a notion of democratic responsibility, and it's so pressing because with artificial intelligence developing, things are speeding up even more. It's going to make it even easier to generate fake news. It's going to speed up the oligarchic decision-making about what is seen and what is not seen. ChatGPT is going to be determining what is visible and what is not. And there's also a problem of the cognitive revolution. A tool such as artificial intelligence will give you an information. You haven't thought about it. You haven't sifted through the information. It has trudged through all of these different aspects. So yes, you're right. Democracy and national education have not yet grasped the scope of the technological transformation that we're going through. A final example, this week we had a terrorist attempt by an incel person. An incel person is an involuntary celibate. And so what does that show? That shows that there is a diffusion of ideologies around the world through social media, and that was not possible before. It didn't exist before. Before these social media, we had some regulation zones with pluralism, with ethics, checking information, moderation. And that was very much reinforced after the Second World War, because mass media had a huge impact on the manipulation of opinions between the two world wars. So all of those regulations were carried out when media was national. Today, ideas, opinions, ideologies circulate internationally. There are no more boundaries. So we have to address this question of regulation and the solutions which we come up with. Perhaps we'll address that later on. Well, perhaps at the end of our session we'll see what the solutions might be. In the meantime, Robert ZARADER, would you like to react to what has been said? Or you, who have seen quite a lot working in communication, do you think that it can impact on how we vote? Is it a reflection of what the world is today? Well, first of all, I'm going to have to carry out my first battle against alphabetical order, because my family name starts with Z and I'm always the last person to speak. Second point. I'm going to paraphrase Jacques Attali, who said that the answer is yes, that's what he said. And I'm going to give Woody Allen's version. The answer is no, but what was the question? So what are we doing? Well, we're wondering about how social media impact voting. I believe that today we do not have any demonstration that it's working in one way or the other. What we have demonstrated is that if we take a look at 2 or 3 points, we can shed some light. The first point, as has already been said, and everything points towards this, the scale of information produced on social media, particularly by influencers, comes in second place around the world in media that are trusted. And that's the first observation. And then, that's ahead of traditional media. Second point, what is the nature of the struggle today? The nature of the struggle is not necessarily how opinions are made, personal or collective opinions. It's increasingly, what are we talking about before we want to address what opinion of a subject we're talking about. So what subjects are being polarized? and what subjects are accentuating polarization. And when we take a look at what is being said in cognitive sciences, for example, and this is what Jacques Attali was saying, that the more you try to stand up for a position, then the more you strengthen that position. The second case, or second point, is that we're all fatigued with all the information that we're receiving. There's too much information about for the general citizen. And a study has shown that half of the French are trying to not listen to the news anymore, whether it's audiovisual news or the newspapers, magazines, or social media. They just don't want to listen to the news anymore. They're tired, they're fatigued by all of the controversy. And so that has also been said. So there's this idea of having heard enough bad news, and that is a phenomenon we must take into account, because it involves looking inwards and just concentrating on your immediate environment. And then there are electoral strategies on social media which have really leveraged that with the Bolsonaro impact with WhatsApp. So he used WhatsApp because he felt that his circle of influence was close. It's the family, the different groups that you interact with, those groups that will choose a subject which interests them. And that was a structural element of the Bolsonaro's election campaign. So there are several dimensions to this, and we have to know which is the right battlefield.
My answer is no on social media. Do social media impact the vote? Because many surveys in the U.S. or the Institute in France show that there's a form of influence or of impact. But at the end of the day, between the battle between emotion and reason does not always lose. So when they vote, in terms of behavior, there's an influence on the context, and that's where the battle is being waged, on the context. And that is linked to other topics. For example, the importance of public audiovisual, to name one, and the importance to build contexts that are better to form an opinion. And to form an opinion, you should not be trapped in wrong narratives. It's much easier to produce fake than to produce real. It's hard to find the truth. It's a difficulty. It's a difficulty that we see more and more. It was very well understood by the President of the Republic on the porosity of societies and in liquid society. And in the liquid society, we see that it's not fake that we have to give up. It's to the reality. We need to protect reality. We need to be able to prove reality and protect the real. And I'm going to end with a quote that is rarely given at X from Grazia Romain Charon, a journalist in Grazia. It makes a comparison. A few years ago, he wrote the text. Hanouna, Cyril Hanouna, is the son of Gilles Debord, and it's the society of the audiovisual that is brought to its maximum. It's interesting to make this comparison because Hanouna is an entertainer by definition. But if we think about the word entertainer or entertainment, and it's about entertaining people. And I believe that the economists should wonder more and more often on should we entertain or should we really change people's mind? So we really need today to look into the society of diversion, of the society of trying to be distracted. And I will end there with an author. The first quote in the book, The Anti-Economist of Jacques Attali, which is a few decades ago now. It's a quotation on the entertainment society industry in the world. And today we see this entertainment sector coming to the top. The last word is is given by Karl Marx when he talks about ideology. He takes the comparison of with photography, the camera obscura, this inverted image when you take a picture that you see in your lens. So if you look at the world the other way around, today the difficulty is to sort out between the real and the fake. And the answer is no, because I'm an optimist. The social media don't create the votes, but the less people resist to social media, the more it becomes difficult. I believe that traditional media play a major role as well in the circulation of fake news on social media, because I believe that they are also a chamber of amplification. And many surveys show it that traditional media are unconsciously very often the accomplice of social media and fake news. So this is just to start a bit of a controversy. Should we regulate at the European, international level the social media to make sure that we keep the integrity of the voters? Is it, well, it's very hard to plug off internet, isn't it? Yes, Jacques. There's a sentence that was said by Mr. Valls at the very beginning of the mandate of Mr. Trump that came unnoticed, but it was fundamental. He said, if the Europeans want to regulate the activities of social media, particularly of X, we will put an end to NATO. We'll get out of NATO. So from the American point of view, which is a superpower to which we give in to too many often, and I'm thinking about particularly about what happened at the G7 summit. We have Americans who believe, maybe wrongly, that the social media have interests that are aligned to the interest of the U.S. They may be wrong, but they still believe it, and their interest is to hide the truth, to impose their own truth and their own conception of the world. And their truth, which is a lie. The consequence of that is deeper than we think, because it means that we only take into account, when we think about the American political power, of the very short-term interest of those who govern. After me, I don't care what's going to happen. That could be the quote of the motto of Mr. Trump, even if it was also probably the motto of Louis XIV. But that's the worst thing about social media, and the most dangerous in democracy when it's ill-conceived, is that it doesn't take into account it only takes into account the short-term interest, as the social media try to convince and please at the moment. Radio, televisions, papers try to sell the paper of the next day, where because they want to make sure that they have a great audience. We are at a turn of humanity where it's more than ever fundamental to take into account the future of younger generations. And we don't take that into account. You can see it with the climate, you can see it with social inequalities, you can see that with the absence of check on technologies, with the artificialization of the world. Nothing that matters for the future generation is taken into account in the decisions, which leads to a dominating ideology, which says, don't worry, everything goes well, what you hear is not true, the debt's not a big deal, climate not a big deal, keep consuming and keep enjoying life, and nothing serious matters. So at some point, this will lead us to some reactions. The same reaction that happens always too late. Instead of watching democracies forming a war economy, considering that it's their survival to reduce inequalities, to fight against climate change, etc. At some point, the populations wake up and they obey to a dictator who's coming by. And as Victor Hugo said, a good idea is a good idea when it arrives at the right time. And arrives a dictator who does what democracy should have done. And I'm afraid that democracy is the next victim, not of social media in the sense that it's going to bring us some clones of democracies. We saw many of those. But because it's going to lead to feeling very powerless in front of the big challenges that we're facing, and the emergence of dictators that will claim to have the solution to all our problems. What is the country that is the most advanced in the evolution towards the climate, mitigating climate change and greenhouse gas emissions, etc.? Which is the country that is the most advanced in mastering technologies? Which is the country that is reducing massively fossil energy? Which is the country that is taking control of the big wealth? It's China. It should be democracies who would do that. But the Chinese model could become a model of managing the long term to the detriment of democracies. So I don't fear in social media the victory of the now, but the emergence of societies that would be in the hands of dictators. Nesrine, on regulation. Yes, I talked in front of the European Commission a year ago. They already put in place the DNA and the DSA, which is a way to forcing platforms to be transparent on their algorithm. There's a documentary, if you want to watch it, on Europe facing the digital giants. It's interesting to see how Mark Zuckerberg is avoiding any form of question. Since it's his companies, he doesn't feel responsible for it because it's his company and not himself. It's hard to explain to you everything that's happening in this documentary, but when I spoke at the European Commission, the regulation aspect was a consultation of 150 citizens throughout the European Union, and we're gathered together to think about hatred in society, and we talked only about social media. When we wanted to tackle the question of hatred, sexism, or racism, the question that we worked on and we talked about all the citizens from Hungary, Germany, France is the question of social media. And I would like to end with a bit of a positive. The social media don't want to be regulated for economic reasons, for political reasons, because they are held by the Elon Musk, the toxic masculinity, the way they speak, and the content. Donald Trump went to visit 3 times an American YouTuber who is a masculinist, who promotes gender-based violence, and etc. So this whole ecosystem works, hand in hand. If you gather as citizens, that was the initiative of the European Union, and we talk and we listen to teenagers between 15 and 18 years old. It was very important to me to see that, to hear that, because in the same room we had some parents who could be concerned about the use of social media by their teenagers, and there were some teenagers themselves who said they were a victim of cyber harassment, etc. So there's already some teenagers who put in place some practices to protect themselves against all that. So during this citizen meeting, there's a series of practices that were listed, that we're going from, okay, since we can't count on Facebook, Instagram to regulate their content, what can we do? Well, we can create some group chats where, if we see a fake news, we circulate it and say, did you see that? What do you think about that? And then the most polarizing topics on the social media are discussed, because we spend all our day long on our phone, all of us in the room, and we scroll all day. We tend to forget that we exist in the real life as informed citizens. Just about being able to talk about it with somebody else already, that's a good step. If I give you this example, it's because there were some people from Hungary, Hungary of Viktor Orban's Hungary, and they were facing some French people, and there's a vision of social media on democracy and LGBTQ that was completely different. And we could see the people changing their mind as soon as they talked to somebody of a different opinion. And that's actually very positive to watch this, because people were still capable to challenge themselves and challenge their own thoughts just by discussing with different individuals. And this is where I will end. I don't think we can expect too much from social media, because they're extremely reluctant. The only thing that the European Union has managed to obtain is the regulation of the algorithm, and it's very opaque. But we can count on ourselves, and I have one hope, because I heard the government talk about it, is that we can forbid the social media in France for the under 15. Every time I say that, it shocks people, but we need to do that, because it is a tool that reinforces cognitive bias, that prevents the neurological development. So we would be really benefit from thinking about protecting our minors, or we just leave them as they are. But then, as of September, we need to have a training on disinformation and fake news and all that. I think that's what we should do in France. Sibyle. So, because I like to contradict a little bit this roundtable, I think there's an impact of social media on the forming of opinion, on its fragmentation, on the difficulty that we have today of political leaders to address a narrative to the citizens. We had a recent example is the election in Romania, the first round of the presidential election in Romania last fall. There was an excellent report made by Visionum to show how TikTok played an important role by manipulated, of course, by entities linked to the Russian power, to support a candidate that didn't have any existence in the media and was not famous at all before he was literally pushed on the stage by the TikTok network. So there is an impact. There is all the more an impact that many actors today have seen the huge opportunity because to work on the war of opinions. It's not very expensive to work on fake accounts, on bots, on disinformation. So today we're fully in an information war, and that's why it's important to measure it and to really take stock of it. When we see how some people use it, Donald Trump, for example, he won, well, he's campaigned in 2016 on X. Then he developed his own social media because he could see how important it is not to do a debate with people who would contradict him, or the journalists who would contradict him. It allows him to tell his story without being contradicted. The journalist contradiction is essential, and we need to make a difference between what we can find, all the opinions that we can find, and all the sources are not the same, and would really gain a lot in terms of information to make a difference between the sources that come from bodies that are legally responsible, that have ethics rules, and they date from 1881. In our country, it's the editorial responsibility of the press. And it leads to a number of obligations. You have to be careful not to spread fake news. this information today, we're in a world where the media follow this this these rules, and there's a deregulated universe as well. So we could see that there's some really strong economic interests that are fighting against it. The the um, the president of the European Union, Ursula von Leyen, who said that we should have a democratic shield in order to make sure that the role of the media, the regulation of social media, would contribute to a more robust functioning of the democracy. It's what she called the democratic shield, because the economic interest, with everything that's been done by Donald Trump on the tax tariffs, has not been treated as a priority, and it is a priority because, in my view, there's a last challenge. It's an economic challenge. Today, the actors, these major platforms, such as the companies, AI companies, they capture an important part of your attention span and the publicity research, because when they grab people, they grab the advertising shares. We are not, my media, we're not financed by anything, by advertising, so we're very robust. And to have a democratic responsibility of the announcers in the way and in how they advertise for their brands or their products is also a challenge of democratic responsibility. So many things have to be done, and this responsibility is at many levels. It's at the level of the regulators, it's at the level of economic leaders, it's also at the level of the media, because since we were reminded early on, there's a contagion effect on networks, on some media, that to have conversations just to get the buzz and just to get the audience. And this effect has to be mitigated. And there has to be a responsibility that has to be harnessed by all the actors, because we have a real democratic challenge ahead of us today. Robert, if you want to wrap up, we don't have a lot of time left. I'm going to make a comment on the three speakers. The first one is a very good thing to forbid the screens and maybe to the under 15, but the answer should be coming before. Should we forbid advertising, recommendations? Because the whole topic is not to stay to be kept in this society of algorithms. So if you want to hit on platforms, you need to hit on money, which is what works. So let's take it a step further and forbid publicity and recommendations. Second point, I'd like to add a sentence by President Chirac: the world is on fire and we're looking in a different direction. No, today we should define a little differently his proposition. No, today the real quote would be: the world is on fire and everybody's on their phone. That's a real topic today, and that's going to be very difficult to find a way to reverse the trend. And the last point, the people who are recently converted. I am a recent convert because I am now converted to. I was an economist. And Jacques Attali is much more relevant than me on the topic of democracy, but there's an old rule, is the rule of arrow, a black SN, which says that we cannot define collective preferences. It's either unanimity, and we see how it works at the European level, or it's either by dictature. And I think Jacques Attali, by pointing this, shows us the incredible current relevance of this theorem, which is that democracy should not be imprisoned in this reality. Thank you for quoting me on that. It started with the paradox of Condorcet, which is the real author of what then Arrow has generalized. He doesn't say that democracy is impossible. He says that the rational choice of democracy is only possible within a system of common values. And this is the whole challenge of what we're facing today. Having common values is the condition of the existence of democracy, equality, fraternity, and liberty, freedom. I have time for to take one question in the room. I want a question, not a long narrative, because we have a very short time ahead of us. Hello, thank you. It was fascinating. I'd like to ask a question on the regulation side that we often mention. Isn't there a need as well to talk about creation and the way of how public media institutions that are losing trust should create some content? So maybe we should train them and they should be financed, because today what is existing in content creation is just new creators who use different codes. And those who do that are not always the best ones. So isn't there a bridge to be made between the people who build trust, who do a good job on social media? They're not that many, but they exist. Because the image that I have is if the social media is an agora, how can I say it? It's up to us to listen to the people who have interesting things to say. And I believe that traditional media must create more and more content that other interesting creators can make. Thank you. Does somebody want to take the question? Sibyle, I said that the media have to adapt and resist, and all the media of the public service have done it. We've tried to create new formats to be present in all those public agoras that are the social media, but also new formats that are digital. Today, podcasts, for example, we can see how political podcasts are very popular. The American election of Donald Trump was based on podcasters like Joe Rogan, and in France, the public service radio is one podcast out of two. But yeah, you're right. We should promote new creators, new generations, to renew our codes, our formats, and make sure that new generations are recognized in what we can say and and the formats of the media. So please, I would like you to negotiate a budget, because we need resources to do that, of course. So, Jacques, it reminds me of a very interesting experience which I had with France Culture, because you need to know how the media, the descending media, TV and radio, can welcome those who are coming up, ascending. So I had a topic with France Culture, which was we were doing our podcast with the employees of France Culture, but why shouldn't we help other from the large audience, at least from the teachers, the academia, to create podcasts? So we launched this challenge where the professors had to do podcasts in their field of expertise. And I heard that there was a great demand, and a lot of teachers asked France Culture for help to know how to do a podcast. And there was a lot of reluctance inside within our jobs. It's our podcast, it's our employees. We don't want to put anybody inside, and because it's us, it's ours. So we need to keep that in mind. I would like to answer on that. We've done it. We have opened up a sort of alliance of knowledge on our platform, in which we broadcast conferences, know-how, everything that is made by cultural institution, the College of France. We have Sciences Politiques, INSERN, all the major institutions of France. And now we have to get these professors into formats that are adapted to the younger audience. I need to stop there, I think. Thank you very much. We are right on time. Thank you to the five of you for coming here with us. Thank you.